Good morning. I have a question for everybody here. It's a very simple question. Where are you? Now, you're probably thinking, if I can read your minds, that's kind of a silly question. I know where I am. You also might be thinking, that's kind of an old-fashioned question. It doesn't matter where I am. Come on, man, this is 2010. We are tweeting and Facebooking and IMing and texting and emailing, and of course, we're talking on our cell phones. And with one of these, it doesn't matter where I am, right? I could be anywhere. Geography is irrelevant. Not so fast. I'd like you to try an experiment. I'd like you to eavesdrop on someone's cell phone conversation the next time you're in public. It's very easy. All you need to do is to be in public, and you'll hear someone talking on their cell phone. And listen to the question you hear that person asking their friend on the other end. Besides, can you hear me now? After that, you're likely to hear, where are you? In fact, researchers in Finland, home of Nokia, looked into this and found that some 80% of all cell phone conversations contain some version of that question, where are you? We are creatures of place. Where we are affects who we are, and it turns out it also affects our happiness. Happiness has an address. And here it is, Happy Road. The fact is that some places are simply more conducive to happiness than others, and we sort of know this intuitively in our language when we say we're looking for happiness, we're searching for happiness, or maybe you've arrived at some new destination and you thought, wow, I could be happy here. So place matters when it comes to happiness, but what do I mean by place? Well, in one respect, I mean simply the lay of the land, the topography. Is it mountainous? Or does it look something like this? This is Lake Mboro in Uganda, and I chose this picture because this is not far from where human beings evolved in the African Rift Valley. And evolutionary psychologists have a theory about why we love a view like this. You notice the water. Have you ever wondered why we humans love looking at water? We will pay a huge premium to look at water. I was once vacationing on the coast of Oregon in the U.S., and I noticed a house for sale, and it advertised a former ocean view. A former ocean view. The idea was in some previous lifetime, this house once had a view of the ocean, so I should now pay extra for it. That's how much we love water. Well, evolutionary psychologists will tell us that it's, in a way, when we look at water, we're looking at ourselves. We're looking at where we came from. Because when humans evolved, this was sort of the ideal setting, was the African savanna, rolling hills, and a source of water. Because water meant nutrients, water meant life. But really, when I say place, I'm talking about culture, national culture. Now, you may not think of this often. You may not even think that your views of the world is affected by whether you're Romanian or Icelandic or American, but you are. It matters. We don't think about it because it's like wearing glasses. We have them on all the time. We view the world that way. Or to use another analogy, it's like a fish in water. The fish doesn't know it's in water until it steps out. But in fact, national culture matters a lot. And some countries are simply happier than others. And the way that scientists, or I call them blissologists, know this is through a very disarmingly simple technique. These scientists of happiness could measure the happiness of any person in this room, and they claim, and I believe it, to be accurate, and this is how they do it. They ask you, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being miserable and 10 being really ecstatic. And the idea is that, as one person put it to me, you can have a disease and not know it, but you can't be happy and not know it. It is subjective, and so you are the authority of your own happiness. Well, they've done these surveys around the world, plotted it on a map, And this is what it looks like, the Atlas of Bliss. And I'll walk you through this just briefly, that basically the dark red places are the happiest, and the lighter colored yellow places are the least happy, with a range in between. Starting with the least happy, there's sort of two categories of unhappy places. One is sub-Saharan Africa, I think for fairly obvious reasons. People's basic needs are not being met. There's another category, which is basically Russia, the former Soviet republics, and I'm afraid to say Eastern Europe, including, yes, Romania, falls into the sort of unhappy belt. And those reasons are less clear. Romania, in case you're curious, ranks about 87 out of 100 countries in happiness. Then moving up the scale, you have Latin America. And before Latin America, I want to talk about East Asia. You have China, Korea, Japan, which are not as happy as you would think they should be, given their income levels. Researchers call this the Great East Asian Happiness Gap, which sounds to me like a sort of Chinese Grand Canyon, but they can't fully explain it. And then, yes, Latin America, happier than it quote-unquote should be based on income levels. And this is called the Latino bonus. You get a bonus for being Latin American, apparently. Certainly, family is one of the explanations for that, the close family ties. Then you have the US, Canada, Australia. And then finally, you have the absolute top tier of happiest places, which surprisingly are not warm tropical paradises. They are cold, dark places, places like Denmark, Iceland, and Switzerland. What I wanted to know was why. Why exactly are some places happier than others? I traveled to 10 countries around the world investigating this, and we can draw a few conclusions. Number one, the quality of a society is more important than your place in it. The quality of a society is more important than your particular standing. Or as I like to put it, better to be a small fish in a clean pond than a big fish in a dirty one. What about money? Everyone wants to know, does money buy happiness? And I can stand here today in Bucharest and say with great authority that the answer is yes and no. It's a little complicated. But basically something interesting happens. As countries and people become wealthier and wealthier, they become happier and happier as they get more of their needs met. At a certain point, though, it stops working. More money does not yield any more happiness. This gentleman is from the nation of Qatar, which I visited in the Persian Gulf. On a per capita basis, the wealthiest country in the world. So if you believe that money buys happiness, the Qataris should be blissful. They're not. The money has been disruptive. They certainly lead a more comfortable life, but I don't think they're necessarily happier. It's as if all of Qatar has won the lottery. And we all think we'd be happier if we won the lottery. But a very interesting study, a sort of classic in the happiness field, done in 1978 by Philip Brickman in the US and his colleagues, he studied people who won the lottery and found out that shortly after, yes, they were happier. But after a year or two, all those happiness gains evaporated and they were back where they started. So that's the thing about sudden wealth. But the Swiss, I think, have a very good attitude towards money. You can be wealthy and happy, you'll be happy to know. While in my country, America, the attitude is, if you've got it, flaunt it, show off your wealth. The Swiss attitude seems to be, if you've got it, hide it. The Swiss do not want to provoke envy in others, and envy is one of the great enemies of happiness. And something else about the Swiss is, I was surprised that Switzerland was on this list. I frankly think of the Swiss as being a bit, how do I put this diplomatically, boring, yes. But the thing is, Switzerland is content. Things run on time. I asked a Swiss friend, don't you have any anarchy in this country? And he said, yes, we do. It's in the afternoon. The problem I realized is words fail us. In English, in Romanian, in most languages, there are many more words to describe unhappy states of mind than happy ones. And so I didn't have the words to describe happiness in Switzerland. I had to invent one, conjoyment, a combination of enjoyment and contentment. The Swiss are content plus. And I think they are, in fact, pretty happy. And last but not least, by any means, the chocolate. It is true that chocolate contains not one, but two chemicals that trigger the release of serotonin in your brain, and serotonin makes you feel good. So yes, eat more chocolate if you want to be happy. Iceland surprised me. It's cold, it's dark, it has the word ice right there in its name. You know, they're not like Greenland. The Icelanders are upfront about what their country is all about. Yet they are happy, and I think one reason is that they have this very interesting attitude towards failure in Iceland. Their attitude is embrace failure. As one Icelandic person told me, better to fail for the right reasons than to succeed for the wrong ones. And this is very liberating, and it explains why Iceland is such a phenomenally creative place. They publish more books per capita than any country in the world. There's, of course, Björk and all the other musicians, some you haven't heard of, and I find that is very liberating. Also, Iceland has an incredible social cohesion. There are only 300,000 people in all of Iceland, and they're all actually related to one another. If you go back 7 generations, as geneticists have, they're all cousins, they're all related, and it is, in fact, one big family. And as one Icelandic filmmaker told me, in Iceland, you never have to worry about falling into a black hole because there are no black holes to fall into. There's always somebody to catch you. Not necessarily the government, but a family member, a friend, a stranger to catch you in Iceland. And I think that served them well during the current financial crisis, which you, of course, have heard about. I think Icelanders have weathered it much better than other countries. And to answer your question, yes, I think they're still happy despite their economic problems. Bhutan, an amazing country sandwiched between India and China and the Himalayas. I went there because Bhutan has a policy of gross national happiness, or GNH, gross national happiness. It's not a joke, it's very serious, and it's an attempt to redress a problem. And the problem is that we only measure national progress in terms of money. One giant cash register called gross domestic product. And the Icelanders thought, well, that's crazy. There's more to life than money. So let's make it a policy of gross national happiness. It is not a perfect policy. It's a work in progress. But the idea is that every government decision made in Bhutan is looked at through this prism, this question, will it make people happier or not? And the idea is catching on. French President Sarkozy has commissioned a study that thought having a happiness index in France was a good idea. Even the dour British are considering having some sort of happiness index, not to replace gross domestic product, but to supplement it. The other thing that I really found fascinating in Bhutan is something a Bhutanese man said to me. He said, there's no such thing as personal happiness. He said, happiness is 100% relational, 100% about your relationships with other people. Thailand, the land of smiles. The interesting thing about smiling, we associate it with happiness. The Thais have 11 different kinds of smiles. Thais will smile at funerals, which can be very disconcerting to foreigners to see that. The other thing is, if you want to know a genuine smile, it's not in the mouth. So despite this gentleman's obvious need of dental work, and I think we have a dentist speaking later, so maybe he can help, it's in the eyes. There are 2 muscles in the eyes called the ocularis oculi. If those are activated during a smile, it's a genuine smile. If not, someone's trying to pull a fast one on you. But what I really found interesting about Thailand was not their variety of smiles, but a saying that they have, really an insult. You think too much, or don't think too much. And when I heard this, I thought, well, that seems crazy. If I'm not happy, which I'm not, it's because I don't think enough, or I'm not thinking in the right way. How can it be that I think too much? And in fact, an interesting sort of research analysis of this idea is American psychologist named Jonathan Schooler and his colleagues at the University of Pittsburgh did an amazingly interesting study. They asked people to listen to a piece of music, and I think we have that music. Maybe we can hear it a bit. And it's Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, a beautiful piece of classical music, and they divided these people into three groups. In one group, they said, listen to the music and try to be as happy as you can while you're listening to this music. And the second group, they said, listen to the music and evaluate, monitor your happiness while listening to the music. And the third group, they said, just listen to the music. There it is. No. The third group just listened to the music. They measured the happiness of these three groups before and after and found out it was this third group, the group that was told to just listen to the music, don't think, that had the greatest boost in happiness. Okay, let's go on. What about my country, the United States of America, the most powerful, wealthiest country in the world? Surely we are the happiest in the world. Not necessarily. In fact, not by a long shot. The U.S. is number 23 out of more than 100 countries in terms of happiness, summed up by our favorite American, Homer Simpson. Why is Homer not happy? Why are we all not happy as Americans? Partly it's due to a decrease in trust in America, and trust is important. It's not money. We're 5 times wealthier than we were in 1950, but no happier. I think it has to do with the changing nature of how we define happiness in the U.S. and really around the world. 2,000 years ago, Aristotle defined happiness as a virtuous activity of the soul. It was a rarefied state reserved for the gods and the fortunate few. These days, all you need to be happy, apparently, is a VW Beetle convertible and enough gumption to dare to be happy, right? So happiness is not just, it's not just a possibility for every American, it is an expectation, and that creates pressure. And it results in what's been called the unhappiness of not being happy, which is no fun at all. So what can we Americans, what can all of us learn from some of the happiest and some of the less happy countries around the world? A few things. Number one, crush envy. Envy is absolutely toxic when it comes to happiness. The least happy country in the world, statistically next door here, Moldova, I found to be a very envious place. And envy is not conducive to happiness. Number two, do not win the lottery. It will not make you happy, and no, you will not be the exception to that rule. Everybody thinks they'll be the exception to the rule. That's statistically impossible. Okay. Get connected. Connect with other people. Remember that your happiness is 100% relational, and that means working on your relationships with friends, families, and with strangers, the person who makes your coffee in the morning. Lower your expectations. Now, this might seem like an odd one, but the Danes know this very well. In Denmark, one of the happiest countries in the world, they actually have very low expectations about the future. Now, I'm not saying this is a prescription for laziness, sitting around. I'm saying you give 100% effort to what you're doing, and you have exactly 0% invested in the results. And finally, remember that happiness is elusive. It's slippery. You never should tackle it head on. Happiness should be, in the words of British philosopher John Stuart Mill, and I'll demonstrate, approach sideways like a crab. There's a happy crab. I think that is definitely something to think about, or as the Thais would say, to not think about, at least not too much. Thank you very much.